Welcome students. In today's video we're going to have a look at 50 homophones. Those are words that sound the same but they mean different things. For example, sail and sail. My name is Callum and welcome to Hedgehog English. Let's just jump straight in. Let's take a look at the words 8 and 8. So 8 is the past simple tense of the verb eat. For example, he ate a delicious lunch of sausages, eggs and beans. And 8 is the number 8, as in, why was 6 afraid of 7? Because 7, 8, 9. Fantastic joke. And now let's take a look at the words bear and bear. Well, a bear is a large mammal with brown fur. So, for example, we saw a grizzly bear in the forest. And bear is without clothing, so naked. For example, winter had left the trees bare. Now let's take a look at the words break and brake. Well, brake is something used to stop or slow down a vehicle. For example, as I was driving, I saw the car in front of me swerve and I had to slam on the brakes. But break, as a verb, means to separate something into pieces. So, for example, if you're not careful with that glass, you'll break it. And now buy, and buy. So first is buy, and this means to purchase something. So, for example, I'm going to the shops to buy some food for the week. Whereas buy is a farewell. So if you're leaving someone's house, you might say bye, you might wave, you might nod, bye, you might, if you're really polite, goodbye or bye-bye. And by means next to or near something. So for example, the cinema is by the bank, or the girl sat by the window in the cafe. Now let's look at the words cell and cell. So cell with a curlicuh is a small unit, such as a biological cell or a prison cell. For example, the human body is made up of millions of cells. Whereas cell with a snake S, it means to exchange goods for money. For example, he wanted to sell his apartment and buy a house in the country. And now let's look at flour and flour. So flour is finely ground powder, usually made from grain or nuts. So for example, if you want to bake a cake, you will need some flour. And flour is the beautiful part of the plant with a stem and a flower, which you might gift or buy for your partner. For example, I bought a beautiful bouquet of flowers for my girlfriend. Next, we'll examine for and for. So for is pro. I'm for something. It's in favor of or in support of something. For example, I'm for local housing development because it will bring more people into the town. But for is the number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. For example, there are 4 seasons in a year. And now hair and hair. So hair is what grows on your head or small hairs on your arms. And for example, she tied her hair up before cooking her lunch. But hare is an animal similar to a rabbit with long ears. For example, while walking in the woods, we saw 2 hares. Then we have heel and heel. So heel with the letter A, that means to become healthy or whole again. For example, it takes a very long time for a broken leg to heal. Whereas heel with an E, H-E-E-L, heel, that is the back part of a foot. So you have the toes and the heel. For example, After walking for several hours, she had a blister on her heel. And then we'll look at the words here and here. Well, here is here in this location. For example, I like it here. It's comfortable, quiet, and cozy. Or you could shout at somebody, "Come here! Hey you! Come here!" But here is to perceive sound with your ears. Hear. So for example, can you hear that whistling sound? Let's take a look at hi and hi. So hi is a friendly greeting. For example, when I see you, I'll say hi. And hi is something far above the ground, something very tall. So for example, the bird flew high above the ground, high up there. Then let's take a look at night and night. So night with a k, night, but pronounced night, is a warrior in armor, metal armor. So for example, the handsome knight rode on a beautiful white horse. But night without the k, just night, is the opposite of day. It's that space between sunset and sunrise when everything is dark. So for example, we stayed up all night doing our homework. Then let's look at no and no. So no with a k and a N-O-W, no, is to have the knowledge or the wisdom of something. So for example, do you know what the capital of England is? And if you said London, you'd be correct. But no, without the k and without the w, no is a negative response, the opposite of yes. So for example, she shook her head to the question to say no. Then we have mail and mail. So mail is letters, packages, parcels, anything sent by post. So for example, he received a lot of mail at Christmas time, whereas male is the opposite of female. So the male sex, you have woman and man, female, male. So for example, male peacocks have beautiful plumage. Then we have meat and meat. So meat is the flesh of animals, which we eat. And for example, I cannot live a day without meat. Ribs, steak, sausages, they are just too delicious. And meet is to come into presence with somebody or get acquainted with somebody. So for example, I arranged to meet my friends at the restaurant. Then there is pair and pair. And pair is two things that are similar. Two things. So for example, I bought a pair of new shoes. But pear is a fruit, a sweet fruit with juicy texture and that characteristic shape, pear-shaped. So for example, I picked the pears from the tree to bake a pie. Would you like a piece? And that brings us to our next homophone, which is piece and piece. So piece is a part or a portion of something. So for example, I offered you a piece of my pear pie. But peace is a state of tranquility, a state of calmness to achieve inner peace. So for example, I'm always for peace, and I wish our world leaders would sit down around the table and try to achieve peace. And then plain and plain. So plain is something not decorated, something not elaborate. It's basic or it's simple. So for example, she looked very plain, but the flower in her hair made her interesting. Plain can also be a large area of flat land. So for example, the rain in Spain stays mainly on the plain, whereas a plane with an E at the end, plane, is an airplane, something that flies in the sky. Or a plane is a carpenter's tool. So for example, the carpenter smoothed the wooden door with a plane. Then we have rain and rain. So rain is drops of water that fall from the sky. So for example, she won't go out in the rain without an umbrella. But rain, with the weird g in there for what seems like no apparent reason, rain, well, that is the period of time that a monarch rules. So for example, Queen Elizabeth II had a long reign. And then we have right and right. So right is the opposite of left. So I have my right hand and I have my left hand. So for example, go straight and then turn right at the junction. And also right is something that is fair or just. For example, it was right to defend your opinion on privatization. But right with a W, right, is to take a pen and put something down with ink on paper. So, for example, he wants to write a book, but he doesn't have any ideas. Let's have a look at sail and sail. Well, sail, S-A-I-L, sail, is a large piece of fabric attached to the mast of a ship so the wind can take it forward. For example, the pirate ship had black sails and cannons along the side. But sale, S-A-L-E, is a special promotion or discount in the shops. So, for example, wow, did you know that shop is having a sale? It's 20% off everything. Then we have seen and seen. So seen with a curly k is a part of a movie, part of a play, or part of a narrative. For example, the characters meet in scene 5. Whereas seen is the past participle of the verb see, I see. So for example, have you seen the new Christopher Nolan movie yet? Then we have see and see. Well, sea with an A, S-E-A, sea, is a large body of water. So for example, the ship sunk in the Mediterranean Sea. Whereas see, S-E-E, see, is to perceive something with your eyes. So for example, can you see the ship in the distance? Or see can also mean to know. So if somebody explains something to you, you can answer with, oh, I see. Oh, I understand. Oh, I see. Then we have seam and seam. So seam with an A, S-E-A-M-A, seam, is a line where two pieces of fabric are joined together. So for example, I took my trousers to the tailor because they were coming apart at the seams. And seem, S-E-E-M, seem, is to give the impression of being or to appear a certain way. So, for example, the manager didn't seem interested in my ideas. Let's move on to scent, scent, and scent. Well, scent is a distinctive smell, usually a pleasant smell. So, for example, I love the scent of fresh roses. And cent is the American unit of currency, which is 1 penny in British. It's 1/100th of a dollar, 1 cent. And so, for example, she fell over, but she found 10 cents on the floor. And cent with a snaky S, that is the past and the past participle of send, send, sent. So, for example, he sent a text message to his friends. Then we'll move on to so, so, and so. Well, so can be used to mean and for that reason, or therefore. For example, it was painful, so I went to see the doctor. And so means to stitch two things, to fix and stitch two things together with a needle and a thread. So, for example, he learnt how to sew so that he could fix the buttons onto his coat. And then there's sow, which means to plant seeds in the ground. For example, farmers usually sow their fields with seeds during the spring. Then we have sight, sight, and sight. Well, sight with the I, sight. That is usually your sense of sight or a view, something that you see. So for example, the view from the mountains was a magnificent sight. And sight is usually a location where something has happened or is happening, maybe a historical site, or for example, you should always wear a helmet on a building site. And then there's sight with a curly cur, which means to quote something or mention something as authority or for evidence. For example, students need to cite their papers to get good grades. Then we will look at son and son. So son is the male offspring, the opposite of the daughter. For example, he always buys his son balloons for his birthday. And then there's sun, which is the sun, the star that the earth orbits around, which provides us with light and heat. Fantastic. So for example, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. And then we have stair and stair. Well, stairs are a series of steps leading from one floor of the building to another floor of the building. For example, she had to climb the stairs because the elevator was broken. And stare means to fix your eyes intently on someone or something. So the example there is, he felt uncomfortable under the teacher's intense stare. Then we have steal and steal. Steal is to take something which isn't yours, to take it from another person without asking for permission. So for example, you shouldn't steal from others. And steel is a hard metal made primarily of iron and carbon. Let's use it in a sentence. The building was made from reinforced steel. Let's have a look at road and road. Road is a paved or dirt pathway for pedestrians or vehicles. For example, the road was full of holes and really needed to be repaired. And rode is the past tense of the verb ride. For example, the boy rode his new tricycle all weekend. Then we'll have a look at rap and rap. Rap is the genre of music, a bit like hip hop and R&B, where the words are recited over a nice groove. So for example, Eminem is a major player in the rap industry. Whereas wrap is the verb we use to describe when you're covering something up, using material or fabric to cover up, usually a present. So for example, she found some nice wrapping paper to wrap her Christmas presents. Let's move on to tail and tail. Tail is the rear part of an animal, not the head, but the tail. For example, my cat does not like it when you touch his tail. And tale with the E at the end, T-A-L-E, that's a fictional story or a narrative. So for example, I read many fairy tales when I was a kid. Let's talk about there, and there. So there is, it denotes belonging to a group of people. For example, their apartment is really nice and even has 4 rooms. And there is about a place. So there, over there. So for example, the bank is over there. Can you see it over there? And there is the contraction of they and are. They are there. So they're going out for dinner tonight. Let's look at through and through. Well, through is the past tense of the verb throw. For example, he threw the basketball to his teammate. And through is to move from one side of something to the other side of it by going through it. Through. So for example, we went through the park to get to the pub. And then we'll look at to, and to. Well, to with one O, the simple to is the expression of movement. We're going to somewhere. It's a direction. So for example, we are going to the cinema. And to is to a degree, about a degree. So when something is to a higher degree of what is desirable. So for example, this film is too long. I was bored an hour ago. And to with a W, two, two is how you say it, is the number 2. I have 2 eyes, thankfully. Let's look at waist and waist. Waist with the letter I is the part of the body between the ribs and the hips. Waist, for example, she has a very narrow waist. And waste with the letter E on the end, waste. That is to use or spend something carelessly. So for example, let's not waste food when children are starving. And now we'll look at wait and wait. Wait, W-A-I-T, wait is to stay in a place until something happens. So for example, he had to wait until the doctor called his name. And weight is the mass of an object. So for example, the weight of an apple is about 100 grams. Then there is weigh and weigh. Weigh with the A and the Y. Way is a direction. So for example, which way is the cinema? Is it right or left? And then weigh is to measure the mass of something, usually with scales. So for example, you should weigh your suitcase before going to the airport. Then we'll look at weak and weak. So weak is lacking in strength, not strong. For example, he felt weak because he hadn't been to the gym for a month. And weak with the 2 E's were E-E-K, week. That is a period of 7 days. So for example, I'm going on holiday for a week. Let's start with which and which. Which is used to refer to one or more of a group of people or things. For example, which teacher do you like best? And witch is a magical woman who can cast spells and curses. For example, in the past, witches were thrown into ponds to see if they could float. Then we have one and won. One is the past simple tense of win. For example, hooray! She won the swimming competition. And one, or one, but pronounced one, is the number 1. So for example, I have 1 nose, thankfully. Then let's look at would and would. Would is a polite way to express desire. So for example, I would really like a ham sandwich. Or it can be a conditional. For example, if I were you, I would seek advice from someone else. But wood is the material we use to make furniture. For example, this table was made from some fine wood. Then we'll go to your and your. Well, your is to express belonging, usually to the person that the speaker is addressing. So for example, is that your hat? And your is the contraction of you are, your. So for example, you're awesome. Then we'll go to allowed and allowed. Allowed means permitted. You are permitted or given permission to do something. So for example, you are not allowed to take scissors on a plane. And allowed is when something is spoken aloud as opposed to silently. It's not done silently, it's done aloud. So for example, I'm sorry, I was just thinking aloud. Then we'll talk about pail and pail. Well, pail is a bucket, typically with a handle that you might use to carry things. For example, take the pail and fill it at the well. And pale is expressing colour, so not so dim or dull, not a lot of colour. For example, you're looking very pale today. Are you sure you're feeling well? Now let's discuss profit and profit. Profit is the financial gain obtained from a business or an investment. So for example, let's celebrate, the company made record profit this month. And prophet is someone who is regarded as a teacher or a messenger or a proclaimer of the word of God. For example, Noah was a prophet who warned the people that God would bring a flood. Now let's look at principal and principal. So a principal is the person who holds the highest position in a school or institution. For example, the principal announced that if we didn't abide by the rules, we would be taken or brought to his office. And principle is a fundamental truth or proposition that serves as the foundation for a system of belief or behavior. For example, it's a matter of principle to always tell the truth. Let's look at vain, vain, and vain. So vain is having or showing an excessively high opinion of your own worth or abilities. For example, he was so vain, he would change his clothes 3 times a day. But vain is a blade attached to a rotating axis which is pushed by wind. For example, she saw the weather vane spinning madly in the powerful breeze. And vein is one of the tubes in your blood circulation system carrying the oxygen-depleted blood towards the heart. For example, the doctor gave the patient an injection into one of his veins. Then we have weather and weather. Well, weather is the atmospheric conditions such as temperature, precipitation and wind. For example, I never listen to the weather forecast because it is usually wrong. And weather is something expressing a choice or doubt between alternatives. For example, I don't know whether to go to the museum or the theatre. If you've enjoyed this long lesson on homophones, then I highly recommend my lesson on minimal pairs. You can practice your pronunciation there. You can find it here. Otherwise, if you want to watch a video that YouTube has personally recommended to you, then you can find that one here. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe.